Hello. In this video, we're going to go through learning target 334, which is to solve polynomials by factoring by grouping. So as the name suggests, what we are going to do is we are going to group pairs of terms together to be able to pull out a greatest common factor. So that's kind of the general idea. And in this first example, this is just as factor by grouping. So I am just going to factor these. So I don't actually have to solve it. I just have to get it to factored form. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to group pairs together. And it's typically like the first two and the second two. And I like to use two different colors so I can kind of see my pairing. And I'm going to find a greatest common factor for each. So for this one, for example, I have 3 x's here and I have 2 here, so I can pull out an x squared. And then in parentheses, you're going to write what you have left. So what I have left is 1x, so x, plus 3. Then you're going to do the same thing, kind of treat it like a new problem. You're going to pull out a GCF. In this case, I can divide out a -4. And then in parentheses, I have left x plus 3. Now, inside the parentheses, those should match. If they don't, you have made a mistake with your factoring by grouping. So double check what you pulled out for your GCF each time, because these should match. And so those are actually our factors. So this is one of them, the one that matches, and then this one is the other one. So I'm going to write those as factors as x squared from here minus 4. There are 2 GCFs. And then x plus 3 is what they had in common. So essentially you're grouping together the greatest common factor and then whatever was left when you pulled that out. And those are our 2 factors. So this is factored form in factoring by grouping. And if you were to multiply this out, you would get this back as your answer. So that's an easy way to check your work. So then I want you to pause the video and do this second one. I'm going to do my work as well. Unpause it when you're ready to see the answer. And here we go for this one. So with our first pair, I can take out an x squared. I'm left with 2x plus 1. Second part, I can take out a 4, left with 2x plus 1. So those give me my factors of x squared plus 4 and 2x plus 1. So now these last two actually ask you to solve. So this one says find the solutions and this one says solve. So I'm going to start the same way. So I'm going to group my pairs together and I'm going to pull out my GCF. So for this one, these are both divisible by 8. I can pull out an r squared. I'm left with r minus 8. Now you notice here that r and 8 don't have anything in common, so their greatest common factor is 1. And you do have to actually pull that out so that you can make your factors in just a second. And I'm left with that r minus 8. So that will give me my factors of 8r squared plus 1 and r minus 8. So that's why the plus 1 needs to be there so that we can complete this factor. Now, to actually solve this, all we have to do is we have to split these and set them equal to 0 on their own. So I'm just going to rewrite 8r squared plus 1 equals 0. And r minus 8 equals 0. So I'm going to solve this one first because it's a little bit easier. So I'm just going to add 8 to both sides, and I get r equals 8. And over here, I'm going to have to do a couple more steps. So I'm going to subtract 1 from both sides, divide 8 on both sides, and take the square root. And remember, if you have a negative sign, you can't take the square root of a negative number. You're going to have an I in your answer. So when I take the square root, I'm just going to take the square root of 1/8. That gives me that number. And so I am going to leave it as positive and negative square root of 1/8. And then an I at the end because it's imaginary. Remember, whenever you take the square root, you should have a positive and negative answer. So plus and minus square root of 1/8, I. If you wanted to write plus and minus this number, I, so plus and minus 0.35, I, that works for me as well. Now I want you to go ahead and pause the video and do this one on your own. So go ahead and do that. All right, and here is the last one. So I pulled out a 3p squared as my GCF for this first one, left with 4p minus 7. Pulled out a 7 for my GCF of the second part, and then had 4p minus 7, which gave me my two factors. Over here, when I solved it, I just added 7 to both sides and divided by 4 to get 7/4 or 1.75. And then this one over here, I subtracted 7 from both sides, divided by 3 on both sides, and then when I take the square root, since I'm taking the square root of a negative number, my answer needs to have an I to represent the imaginary number. And I get plus and minus the square root of 7/3 I, or plus and minus 1.53 I. So those are my answers. And you won't always get imaginary numbers for these. If you actually went back and solved these first two, or this first one specifically, this first one only has real solutions. So you'll get an answer plus and minus 2 and then -3 over here. So if you wanted to try that, that's good. I just wanted to include imaginary solutions here because those are the harder ones. So I wanted you to see them in examples first. So go ahead and do the practice problems on the back of this, and then you can check the answer key to see if you're right.